Spring 2022 marked the beginning of a new reality for the women and girls of Turkmenistan, one that felt more like a nightmare. In Ashgabat and other cities, police raids began suddenly, without any official warning or explanation. Any detail could trigger a stop and interrogation: bright lipstick, winged eyeliner, shaped eyebrows, or simply wearing too much foundation. Law enforcement officers, often acting rudely and aggressively, set up cordons, literally pulling women out of the crowd whose appearance did not meet the new, unwritten but strict standards of modesty. For many women, who had used cosmetics for years without worrying about how the state viewed their faces, this was a shock. Familiar shades of lipstick turned into potential evidence, and makeup bags became a source of danger. Reports leaking into independent media and social networks painted a grim picture. Young women were detained on their way to work or university, scolded in front of passers-by, and forced to scrub off their makeup on the spot with wet wipes or tissues. In particularly severe cases, police filed official reports. Bystanders at bus stops or in queues looked away, pretending not to notice, knowing that intervening could bring trouble upon themselves. This was not a one-time crackdown, but the start of a systematic, total campaign to control women's bodies and appearance in public spaces. The scale of the problem was nationwide, reaching far beyond the capital. In the regions, patrols were even more brazen. In smaller towns where everyone knows everyone, the pressure was accompanied by the added humiliation of threats to inform relatives or employers. Remarkably, all these actions were carried out under the banner of strengthening national traditions and moral education, turning a woman's personal choice into a matter of state surveillance. Overnight, the morning ritual of applying makeup became an act of civil disobedience, and mascara became a potential tool of provocation.
Women began to wonder if their lip gloss was too shiny or their blush too visible, fearing they would be deemed provocative for simple self-care. It was a clear signal. Private life was over. Every aspect of your appearance was now subject to public judgment and punishment. But while makeup can be washed off, however humiliating the process, what do you do when the state dictates the clothes you must wear every single day? The private beauty soon took on a literal, painful dimension. Fines for an untraditional appearance, makeup, false eyelashes, dyed hair, reached sums comparable to a month's salary. But the threat of losing one's status was far more terrifying than the fine itself. The system was particularly ruthless toward women working in government institutions, schools, hospitals, and ministries. Violating the unwritten dress code threatened immediate dismissal for violating corporate ethics or forced resignation under pressure. A career built over years could collapse in a single day because of winged eyeliner. This financial and professional discrimination created an atmosphere of pervasive fear. Women had to think twice before allowing themselves even the most minor beauty treatment, let alone visiting salons, many of which were forced to stop offering eyelash extensions or nail art. Those beauticians who dared to continue worked semi-legally, constantly watching the door and expecting inspections. Thus, through fines and the threat of unemployment, the state was not just controlling appearance, but directly attacking women's economic independence and social status, forcing them into a position of even greater dependency. Any attempt to earn a living with one's hands, through makeup, hairstyling, or manicures, could be declared immoral and illegal at any moment, which is particularly cynical given the official slogans about supporting small business. Wearing national dress in Turkmenistan has long ceased to be a voluntary act of following tradition.
For university students and all female civil servants without exception, it has transformed into a mandatory uniform, regulated with a rigidity that would shock even the strictest corporate manager. Outwardly presented as a tribute to culture, in practice, any deviation, a slightly different cut, a different fabric, is perceived as disobedience. This dress code has nothing to do with comfort or cultural identity. It is a tool for total unification and the suppression of individuality. A woman finds herself sewn into a dictated image, deprived of the right to adjust it to her tastes or needs. The mandatory outfit is a multi-layered and incredibly uncomfortable ensemble. Its foundation is a floor-length dress, usually made of dense, often synthetic velvet, heavily decorated with traditional embroidery. The fabric itself is heavy and does not breathe, and the abundance of embroidery adds even more weight. Even in the summer months, when temperatures in the shade regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit, there are no alternatives. Sweat runs down the back, fabric clings to the body, but the need to maintain decency prevents women from unbuttoning a collar or lifting a hem. Under the dress, defying all logic, women are required to wear balak, long, wide trousers, also typically made of thick fabric. Every step in such an outfit requires effort, especially climbing stairs or during long commutes in crowded transport. The head must be covered by either a scarf for married women or a skull cap for unmarried girls, often embroidered as well. These are fixed tightly to prevent slipping, leading to tension headaches. The entire outfit creates a thermos effect, making every trip outside a test of endurance. Physical suffering, heat stroke, skin irritation from synthetics, and exhaustion has become the norm. What official rhetoric calls the beauty of national costume is for many women daily torture. The control has reached absurd levels.
There are cases where students were barred from classes or exams not because they weren't wearing the dress, but because the embroidery pattern on their collar or cuffs was deemed insufficiently traditional or too modest. The definitions remain vague. A pattern acceptable today might be banned tomorrow, making the system unpredictable and therefore even more frightening. Entrances to universities and government buildings have turned into filters, where guards and ethics commissions inspect compliance with shifting standards. Each entry is a humiliating ritual. A woman must submit to the evaluating gaze of strangers, knowing that a single stitch on her dress could be grounds for a reprimand. A telling example is the story of a teacher from the city of Mary. A security guard stopped her at the school entrance and forced her to change into a correct dress kept in the cloakroom, even though her own clothes were long, modest, and made of lighter cotton fabric. For the teacher, this was not just an inconvenience, but a demonstration of submission. She was shown clearly who decides what is right. She spent half an hour in a stuffy closet changing clothes and was late for her own class, enduring the ridicule of colleagues. Her students waited in the classroom confused, only to later hear ironic comments from other teachers about the need to dress correctly. Such incidents are not rare. They demonstrate how national costume has turned from a symbol of culture into a weapon of daily suppression, and wearing it is a display of loyalty branded onto the body through discomfort and pain. The memory of such humiliations settles in the body and mind, forcing a woman to look at her reflection every morning not as herself, but as an object of external control. But if the physical discomfort of the dress code can be endured, the ban on free movement strips women of their last shred of independence.
One of the most shocking yet silenced aspects of discrimination in Turkmenistan is the de facto ban on women driving. There is no legal basis for this. Formally, no one has revoked women's licenses. Documents remain valid on paper, but in reality, they are useless plastic cards that are dangerous to show to an inspector. Since 2018, a campaign has effectively purged women from the roads. The chronology resembles a well-planned operation. It began with traffic police stopping female drivers for any pretext, document checks, vehicle inspections, or suspicion of drunk driving. The wording was chosen to give inspectors maximum discretion. Then, finding no real violations, they simply began confiscating driver's licenses and refusing to return them. This was often accompanied by psychological pressure, attempts to make the woman feel guilty for the very fact of driving. Absurd justifications were given. You don't belong behind the wheel, it's not women's business, or your husband will worry. By 2021, a woman driving in Ashgabat had become a rare, almost exotic sight. On the roads where women had recently driven minivans, taxis, or private cars, almost exclusively men remained, and this was silently accepted as the new norm. The official reason, sometimes whispered in corridors, sounds like a parody. Allegedly, women cause more accidents, so they are dangerous on the road. No statistics have ever been produced to support this. In fact, global data suggests the opposite. The absurdity of such explanations is obvious to anyone who saw women driving peacefully for years. The real reason lies in the patriarchal logic of total control. A car is a symbol of freedom, independence, and mobility. The ability to choose a route, visit a friend, go to the market, or take a child to the doctor without permission contradicts the model of total submission.
By removing this possibility, the system tethers the woman to the home, making her dependent on male relatives or expensive and not always available taxi services. The tragedy of this situation is illustrated by a story from Balkanabat. A young mother woke in the middle of the night to find her small child convulsing with a high fever. The ambulance service, as is often the case in the regions, did not respond. The dispatcher cited high workload. The family's car was in the driveway, and the keys were in the pocket of her sleeping husband, who was away working shifts. Although she had a valid license, fear paralyzed her. She could not bring herself to drive the child to the hospital. She was terrified that traffic police would stop her, confiscate her license, and detain her, wasting precious minutes. The thought of facing a protocol and humiliating interrogation instead of a doctor was unbearable. In the end, she had to wake her neighbors and beg for help. Neighbors helped take the child to the hospital. The child survived, but the story left a deep trauma. The woman realized her complete helplessness in a critical situation. Later, she admitted that every time she walks past the car in her driveway, she feels not joy at owning property, but a bitter reminder that she is forbidden from using this resource. Deprived of the right to drive, women fall under even tighter and more pervasive control in the very sphere that should be a sanctuary, family life. Yet this total control in family life is merely a continuation of state policy that has artificially thrown the country back decades, forcing modern Turkmen women to look at the not-so-distant past with nostalgia and bewilderment. Conversations with grandmothers and mothers increasingly turn into comparisons of two realities, where the older generation notes with sadness, "We lived more freely." Recollections of the older generation paint a picture that today's youth find hard to imagine.
For women born in the 50s or 60s, their youth coincided with an era when the Turkmen SSR was part of the secular Soviet project. Back then, in Ashgabat, one could see students in miniskirts and female postgraduates with uncovered hair freely discussing scientific papers in university corridors. It never occurred to anyone to measure sleeve lengths with a ruler or inspect dress patterns at university entrances. Many of today's grandmothers received their education at leading universities in Moscow, Leningrad, or Kyiv, building careers as engineers, doctors, and educators. They lived in dormitories, went to libraries, studied late into the night for exams, and the only criteria for evaluation were knowledge and professional results, not lipstick color or hair length. Photographs from family archives show them at May 1st demonstrations in bright dresses without a hint of a headscarf, let alone the figure-concealing long dress known as the koynak. These images, yellowed with time, now look like frames from a parallel universe where Turkmen women could laugh freely on the street without fearing their laughter would be deemed a challenge to morality. Education for girls was not just accessible, it was encouraged as a path to progress and equality. The current regression is particularly cynical against the backdrop of rhetoric about national revival. Under the pretext of returning to roots and traditional morality, a substitution of concepts has occurred. Indigenous, often quite free elements of Turkmen costume and life have been replaced by artificially constructed, strict norms designed not to revive culture but to control the population. What used to be a living tradition, changing flexibly with the people, has turned into a frozen set of instructions enforced not by law but by fear.
This creates a painful paradox for young women. They are forced to obtain higher education, spending years studying, but are then systematically deprived of the opportunity to apply their knowledge. The requirement to study becomes a formal attribute of a decent biography, not a guarantee of professional growth. A diploma for a doctor or programmer becomes not a ticket to a profession, but merely a formal attribute of a well-bred bride, after which the girl is expected to become a housewife. This gap between generations is visible in the story of one family. Grandmother Ina, now 70, defended her PhD in physics at Moscow State University and ran a laboratory. Her granddaughter, 22-year-old Myri, graduated with honors from the same Turkmen university but is forced to hide her professional ambitions from male colleagues. Last month, Myri received a strict reprimand at work for daring to dye her hair a caramel shade, an impermissible liberty. For Ina, this is not just an offensive episode, but a personal tragedy. She sees how her granddaughter's potential is deliberately curtailed, even though formally they both have an education. Such a gap between generations is not just painful, it is a tragic waste of the nation's potential.
In such conditions, any normal woman seeks a way to bypass the system to preserve a particle of personal choice and dignity. Driven into a corner by official bans, Turkmen women have shown amazing ingenuity, creating an entire parallel universe of shadow services. This is not just a desire to wear makeup out of spite, but a deep need to reclaim control over their own bodies and appearance, at least in a narrow, private space. This resistance has taken the form of a massive black market for beauty and cosmetics, operating under strict rules of conspiracy. Underground beauty salons are not just businesses, but entire secret clubs, accessible only by word of mouth and after careful vetting.
For many clients, a visit there becomes not only a care procedure, but a rare opportunity for frank conversation, exchanging news, and feeling solidarity. Manicurists, makeup artists, and hairdressers receive clients at home in ordinary apartments. Appointments are made via encrypted chats and messengers, and at the door, instead of a sign, there is a password, a specific number of rings. Every detail, from the arrival time to where to leave shoes, is thought out for safety. Clients arrive one by one, trying not to attract neighbors' attention. One such salon in Ashgabat, organized in the living room of a two-room apartment, can transform instantly into an ordinary home in case of a police visit. Hair dryers and stylers are hidden in a compartment behind the sofa, nail polishes go into cereal boxes, and the professional chair is covered to look like a shapeless beanbag. In seconds, the carefully constructed workspace dissolves like a theater set, leaving only traces, the faint smell of polish, quickly aired out by an open window. Supplying materials for this forbidden industry is an operation comparable to smuggling. Since the official import of many cosmetic products, especially for hair coloring or injectables, is either banned or incredibly difficult, a network of mules has formed. These are mostly women who fly to Turkey, the UAE, or Russia under the pretext of shopping or visiting relatives. They look like ordinary passengers with suitcases, but inside their luggage lies what will become a tool of self-expression for hundreds of women. They transport Botox vials, expensive hair dyes, and professional makeup in suitcases with false bottoms, inside hollowed-out toys, or among baby food. Every trip turns into a risky expedition where one must plan how to pack jars and bottles so they don't arouse suspicion during inspection. The risk is enormous. At customs, such fines threaten heavy fines and confiscation, but demand creates supply.
Losing a single batch can mean months of lost work for a beautician, queues of unhappy clients, and serious financial losses. An alternative to smuggling has become a system of bribes. Many women make deals on the spot. One can have eyelash extensions or a bright manicure if a certain sum is paid monthly to an inspector at work or a district police officer so that he doesn't notice the violation. For the system itself, this is also profitable. Formally, the rules are maintained. On paper, everyone is modest, but in reality, another source of income is created for those in power. The price of beauty here is measured not only in money, but in constant risk, turning the simple desire to look good into an act of civil disobedience. Social ties play a key role in this shadow infrastructure. Open advertising is impossible, so the main channel is recommendations. One satisfied client whispers to another, she to a third. Closed chats appear in messengers, accessible only by invitation. People don't write directly, "I do manicures" or "I do cosmetology." Instead, hints, euphemisms, and ironic expressions understood only by insiders are used. Correspondence is often deleted immediately after booking an appointment so that no traces remain on the phone in case of a check. This secret language becomes a kind of code for a small underground community in which women recognize each other by half hints and indirect phrases. But even outside messengers, a moral dilemma and fear of exposure are constantly present. The heaviest consequence of this system is deeply ingrained fear and an atmosphere of general distrust. A client of an underground salon lives in constant anxiety. What if the beautician gets caught and chat history, or worse, before and after photos are found on her phone? She understands that her image, her face, her hands could end up in the possession of those who view any immodesty as a crime.
This could lead to a police visit to her home, a scandal at work, and shame for her family. Therefore, many women delete all correspondence immediately after procedures, and beauticians keep client records only in memory or in encrypted paper notebooks. A harsh moral dilemma arises. If a client is detained and pressured, Will she give up the beautician to soften her own fate? And if she does, what will happen to the beautician and her family? In every such hypothetical scenario, there is not only fear of punishment, but also guilt before other women trying to survive in this system. This oppressive fear cements the silence, but simultaneously corrodes female solidarity from within. Beauty, which in any other society is a reason for compliments and connection, here becomes a dangerous secret, a source of stress, and a potential tool for destroying lives. It turns the natural female desire to like oneself into an act of quiet but desperate civil disobedience, the price for which can be exorbitantly high. But even these small tricks and islands of freedom cannot hide the main thing, the total moral pressure that permeates every aspect of public life, turning ordinary human joys into forbidden fruit. Any sphere where a woman could feel freer, appearance, movement, communication with a loved one, finds itself under the scrutiny of an invisible overseer. Control has spilled far beyond appearance, forming an invisible but rigid grid of rules for behavior in public places. In fact, an unspoken curfew for unmarried women operates in the country. After 10 p.m., a woman appearing on the street without the accompaniment of a male relative, father, brother, or husband, is considered suspicious and may result in detention. Evening streets, which could be spaces for walks, meetings, and relaxation after a workday, turn into high-risk zones where one can only tread with a permitted chaperone.
Patrols, especially in parks and on embankments, have received informal instructions to impose order. Grounds for detention and a subsequent educational conversation involving parents can be anything, from walking alone to sitting on a bench with a man. In these conditions, even a banal desire to breathe the night air or look at city lights begins to be perceived as a luxury. Raids on couples have become a real hunt. In parks, cafes, and even shopping centers, police officers or specially created morality squads can demand that a man and a woman sitting together show their passports and prove they are legally married. In minutes, the intimate space of two people turns into a case verifying relationship status. If a marriage stamp is missing, they face public reprimand, a fine, and in the worst case, detention and humiliating calls to parents. For young people, this means that every visit to a cafe, every trip to the movies is accompanied by fear. Will uniformed men enter now and demand to confirm the legality of their feelings? There is a known incident in a cafe in Turkmenistan where a young couple, simply holding hands at a table, was taken by officers to a back room, lectured for 2 hours on immoral behavior defaming the Turkmen woman, and forced to write explanatory statements. During this, officers made derogatory comments and asked intimate questions, trying to shame the young people. This creates an atmosphere of universal fear and distrust. Even a glance at a stranger can be interpreted as indecent. Young women learn to walk with their eyes down, avoiding smiles and spontaneous gestures to avoid giving grounds for accusations of frivolousness. Paradoxically, often the strictest guardians of this morality become one's own male relatives. Fearing public shame and accusations of having poorly raised a sister or daughter, many brothers and fathers take on the role of domestic morality police.
They control movements, calls, and social circles, effectively duplicating state surveillance at the family level. Every exit from the house becomes a necessity to coordinate the route, return time, and explain exactly who the meeting is with. A girl who dares to go on a secret date risks not only encountering the state machine, but also being rejected by her own family, for whom reputation, understood as the absolute submission and invisibility of a woman, becomes the highest value. Inside the home, the same phrases sound as in official rhetoric. It is proper. What will people say? You are shaming the family. This double pressure, from the state and the family, leaves deep scars on the psyche, teaching an entire generation of women to live in constant anxiety, where the natural expression of feelings is equated to a crime. Gradually, internal censorship becomes so strong that even where formally no one is watching, women continue to behave as if an invisible camera is observing them. All this happens against the backdrop of the glossy image the regime so diligently creates for the outside world. White marble Ashgabat, with its gilded statues, fountains, and perfectly clean streets, is often compared to a deserted museum or a movie set. On a sunny day, the whiteness of the facades hurts the eyes, reflecting in shop windows and bus stops, creating an illusion of prosperity and order. This cold, polished beauty is an exact metaphor for the state itself, impressive on the outside and empty on the inside. Majestic buildings erected over the last 2 decades often stand half-empty. There are few people in the spacious halls, elevators run almost empty, and behind high windows hide offices where decisions are made about what color a woman's hair should be or how long her dress must be.
Their facades dazzle passers-by, but behind the closed doors of apartments in these elite buildings live ordinary people whose daily life consists of fear, humiliation, and the struggle for the elementary right to self-determination. Luxurious shopping centers selling expensive imported goods are inaccessible to the majority of the population, living on modest salaries or without work at all. Many come there just to look, to walk through cool halls that resemble a set for someone else's inaccessible life. Happiness is not measured by the width of avenues or the height of monuments made of white marble. It is born in the freedom of choice, to sit behind the wheel, to wear a favorite dress, to go for an evening walk. It is precisely this that Turkmen women are deprived of, forced to play the role of silent props in a grandiose but inhumane spectacle that the regime stages for itself.